Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and today we're going to be looking at the legendary radio host, Long John Nebel, and his Party Line radio show. He was the first guy. If you liked Art Bell, before him was Long John Neville, at least as far as I understand it. We'll learn all about him as we read this article about him. Either way, he started doing the radio show and talking about paranormal. He started his radio show, or rather, his radio show was about watching, while they're looking at weird paranormal things, including UFO sightings. Either way, it looks like a fun article. So let's get into this. Well, let's look at some artwork first from my own upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs, and then we'll learn more about Long John Neville. Okay, just a moment, folks. Here we are. Here's the extreme 90s cover for my graphic novel Scumdogs. I did this cover to harken back to the, comics coming out of Image Comics in the early 90s. And my book is a parody book. I lovingly parody 80s cartoons like, Transformers and G.I. Either way, the Scumdogs were once famous pro athletes that competed in superhuman sporting events known as the Scumdog Sports. Sporting events held with superhuman monsters as the athletes. The Scumdogs got banned for sports, and then they decided to take over the universe. It's just a simple idea to get my characters out there doing villainous things, fighting the good guys, or rather the so-called good guys. You'll learn about them in a moment, the Wild Rangers. Either way, the Scumdogs are led by Deathmug. Deathmug is the purple guy with the metal mask over here. Deathmug is a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. I designed him to look like them. If you notice, he has a skull for a face, much like Skeletor, who's the main enemy of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon. He also has a skull like Skullmaster from Mighty Max. But he's purple. I colored him purple because a lot of villains are just colored purple. But I based Deathmug's personality on, Carlton Banks. Carlton Banks was the butt monkey of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know, Will Smith, that was his show from the 90s. Carlton Banks was over the top, arrogant prick of a character who always gave me vibes. If he had superpowers, he'd be a supervillain. So basically, it took Carlton, crossed him over with Skeletor, and created Deathmug, an arrogant dictator who wants to rule the universe. And if you think he's insane, let me tell you about his archenemy, Buick Starpoon, the guy with the pink pompadour hair over there with the green and white uniform. Buick Starpoon is what you'd get if you take, Zap Brannigan, the space captain from Futurama, and basically actually try to give him a competent job. Actually, because he is incompetent, he wouldn't be able to do it. And that's pretty much Buick Starpoon right there, an incompetent moron who's the captain of his own space force, or rather of his own force in the space forces. Either way, he leads his team against the Scumdogs in mighty battles of, who is the bigger moron. Either way, when he battles the Scumdogs, they have epic battles and they're just fun to watch. It's too bad they're complete morons, but they still try to do their jobs. The Wild Rangers, by the way, are my parody of G.I. Joe, which means each of the Wild Rangers has a military specialty. That's basically their special skills and abilities that allow them to fight their enemies, like the Scumdogs. Buick Starpoon's special skill is that he's a captain of the Space Forces, and you'll know all of the Wild Rangers because they all wear a similar uniform. The Buick Starpoon's green-white. Seen it? Green and white uniform. Down here, this guy with the mohawk, with the navy blue and white uniform, his name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he's a soldier from the U.S. Army. He was transferred over to the Wild Rangers to fight the Scumdogs. Then you have this bald guy down here with the gun and the blue and white uniform. His name is Beach Pounder, and his military specialty is that he's a Marine. Then you have the guy back here in the red uniform. His name is Blast Tank, and his specialty is that he's a tanker. Otherwise, he drives around tanks or weaponized vehicles. This cover is one of 3 different variant covers. That means when my graphic novel is done, you'll have a chance to back 3 different covers. This is one of 3. Not too bad. Yeah. Now let's go over here and look at Girl Friday. Girl Friday is a female member of the Wild Rangers. She's the second in command and helps Buick Starpoon lead them. The thing is, she hates Buick Starpoon's guts. She hates all the Wild Rangers. She knows they're morons, and she was assigned to basically babysit them and make sure they do their job when fighting the Scumdogs. But otherwise, she hates everyone around her because she thinks they're morons. Then we have Deathmug's henchman, Murder Mouth and Sloppy. Murder Mouth is the blue guy with the top hat up here, and Sloppy is the big fat pink guy down here with shape-shifting powers. These guys are Deathmug's henchmen because all 80s villains had henchmen, and they were usually complete morons. Then we have Hair Middle Doctor. Hair Middle Doctor is a member of the Scumdogs. He's a human. If you're wondering why he's a human and not a monster like the rest, he was hired. He was hired after they became villains. They needed a mad scientist to help them take over the universe by inventing weapons and machines. He does it while rocking out as a hair metal musician mad scientist, because I think that's awesome as a villain. Then we have Miss Brusty Melons. Miss Brusty Melons here. Miss Brusty Melons is a parody of the hot villainous archetype character. She fancies herself a villainess, but really she's just a rich bimbo with too much money. She only basically joined up with the Scumdogs because she was bored, and she decided to use her vast fortune to basically back and fund all of their evil world conquering schemes. Either way, she's just a moron. She's a moron like the rest of the characters, but she's going to be fun to read about. She's basically my parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe, the Cobra's top spy and infiltration agent, as well as Black Widow and other female spy characters. But really, since she's basically just cosplaying a spy and just basically backs and funds all of their evil schemes and only dresses up in a spy's catsuit because she thinks it makes her look evil, she's just a moron like the rest of the characters. All right, let me exit out of here and we'll move on. By the way, please hit that like button. Please share this video out. And if you want to see this stream again, use the link on the pinned tweet. Use the link on the pinned tweet on my Twitter page at 777megachris1. And please share this video out. Either way, folks, let's go over here and look at some Indiegogos real quick. Here's Zombie Sama, Dorm of the Dead graphic novel. It's made $34,008, now funding through in demand. Let me get this book up here to look at real quick, folks. Just a moment. All right. It's a 104-page full-color epic graphic novel. 30,000 stretch goal. Irene Stelitsky trading card. Okay. Now, not too bad here. Looks very good. Now, let's see. Zombie-sama, Dorm of the Dead. All right. Let me get this right here. Zombie-sama, winner special, one-shot special. Trying to get this up here. New perk, Gatecrasher Ashcan. All right. I'm trying to. I guess I might have skipped it. The book is about the world has survived the pandemic. Students have returned to college. Higher education parties and unleashed. Higher education parties and unleash their out-of-control co-ed hormones. And everyone knows in horror that leads to sex and zombies. As before, destiny beckons college sophomore Jim Okami to answer the call and save humanity. The dead have risen again, and the zombie-sama must return, whether he likes it or not. It's time to school them dead. Okay. You can back this book for the digital version for $10. Digital Zombie-sama collection, $20. Okay. Winner Ronin Prelude. All right, not bad. Missed the last one, $26 back Zombie-sama, the original Zombie-sama for $26. Not too bad. The blank sketch cover edition, $30. IGG exclusive edition, $35. Only available on Indiegogo. There's $35 edition of Zombie-sama, Dorm of the Dead. There's also Gatecrasher Ass Can bundle, Iron Siliski edition, $40 for this particular cover. Dan Mendoza edition cover. Dan Mendoza edition. Zombie-sama, Dorm of the Dead trade paperback with the cover by Dan Mendoza. Dan's adorable, voluptuous cheerleader has just been stabbed by her hero, Jim Unmistakably Mendoza, signed by John and Billy, includes all queer stretch goals, items, and free digital edition of Zombie-sama, Dorm of the Dead. Okay, not too bad. Looks pretty good here, folks. Billy Tucci hardcover edition, $60. Creator Zombie-sama Billy Tucci illustrates the cover of this gorgeous hardbound edition, not to be missed, signed by John and Billy, includes all required stretch goals, items, and free digital edition of Zombie-sama, Dorm of the Dead. Not too bad. You can back this book for, $35 for this special cover, or you can get the blank sketch cover edition for $30. Yeah, they're not too badly priced, and you can get the original book for $26. Go back, Zombie Samba, Dorm of the Dead. It's up on Indiegogo, folks. Either way, took enough time looking at that. I think now we'll move on. We'll be starting this article right here. Long John Nebel and his Party Line Radio Program, Part 1. Long John Nebel, and his Party Line stuff, radio program by Raymond A. Keller, PhD, aka Cosmic Ray, the author of the international award-winning Venus Rising series, published by Headline Books and available on Amazon.com while supplies last. All right. For the Long John Nebel, looks pretty good. Let's read exactly what this is about, folks. From the Long John Nebel papers at Syracuse University, New York, Southern California, contactee George Amsky, L. being interviewed by radio personality Long John Nebel. R. Amsky is left, and Long John Nebel is right. Yeah? See him right here and stuff. See them right here. Yeah. Amsky was a frequent guest on Long John Nebel's Party Line radio talk program on New York City's WAR at 710 on the AM dial. Long John Nebel revives radio. All right, let's talk about this, folks, about Long John Nebel. In 1954, radio was in competition with the burgeoning media of television for the capture of ever bigger audiences. It looked like radio was losing, but then the owner of an auction barn in New Jersey, the 43-year-old lean and lanky John Zimmerman, he was born John Zimmerman. He's our Long John Nebel guy here. He changed his name to that. It was born in 1911, died in 1978. 78 and stuff like that, aka Long John Nebel, approached the manager of the powerful 50,000 watts WAR 710 AM, 710 AM, Class A and stuff like that. That's the name of the radio company or the radio station he was going to be working at. Powered, the powerful 50,000 watts WAR 710 AM, Class A clear channel radio station in New York City with the idea of a call-in talk show centered on popular paranormal subjects, but particularly the ever elusive flying saucers that everyone had been reporting over North American skies since 1947. This was 3 years before the Soviets launched their first Sputnik satellite. Nevertheless, WAR's powerful signal extended to 32 states and several eastern Canadian provinces. Not bad. The hierarchy at WAR carefully considered the idea. They felt they had nothing to lose, as their scheduled format offered nothing to distinguish itself from the offerings of the many other radio stations in the New York City market. To give Nebel a tryout, with such a program, they placed it in the late night time slot of midnight to 5:30 a.m. and called it the Party Line. Variably catching all of the night owls, insomniacs, and truck drivers. The station managers betting on Long John Nebel paid off handsomely. By the beginning of 1958, Long John, aptly named Party Line program, had long since rocketed to the top of the ratings. Long John Nebel had become the nation's hottest personality and ruler of the talk show airwaves, without competition since its start 4 years earlier. I imagine he wasn't uncontested on that spot. The king of late night radio. That is something you'll always be remembered for, folks. Long John Nebel, the man who basically had the crown before Art Bell. And he wore it well. But then, of course, Art Bell came along and, several decades later, actually. I mean, he started back in 1968 as a young kid in radio and over in Vietnam. But so good 10 years before, Long John Nebel ruled the airwaves, where even Art Bell was basically just beginning to get into it. Yeah, I know he did. Art Bell did something back in 1968 with radio and stuff like that. I know that much. I'm a little iffy on what it was. Is something to do with radio. I think he was in Vietnam. He was doing something with it like that. It would be years before he actually started his own radio program, or rather basically become what he was over the next few decades. Either way, until then, the stuff of that until that happened, Long John Nebel was pretty much the king of late night talk show radio and paranormal affairs. It's an interesting idea, to say the least. But hell, I have no doubt that Art Bell was inspired by Long John Nebel's program and by the man himself. But let's continue to read more and see exactly what happened and learn a bit more about Long John Nebel. Yeah. Uh, Argosy magazine correspondent. It was early 1958 that Long John Nebel permitted a correspondent from Argosy, a man's magazine also headquartered in New York City, to visit the War Broadcast Studio in downtown New York City one night to observe the production of the Party Line program, the process of researching an article about the increasing popularity of the show and growing fascination with the topics being discussed nightly. The correspondent, Herbert Bailey, noted, "I was in War's studio being amazed by the incredible goings-on that developed minute by minute. He, Long John Nebel, told his radio listeners, Argosy magazine isn't a puff sheet. A puff sheet isn't a puff sheet, huh? By that, I mean Bailey, who is writing a story about me and my show, isn't going to write a glowing account of Long John Nebel and his Party Line. He isn't going to say I'm a great guy and that the Party Line is the very end when it comes to radio shows. He doesn't write publicity releases, and Argosy isn't the type of Argosy isn't the type of magazine that would print them anyway. He's a pretty cynical guy, and I expect to be slammed, but plenty." Okay, yeah, I would imagine he would. Well, cynical or no, I was jolted. It happened that I was just thinking of a suitable, glowing, and non-cynical objective to describe Long John's show, and now I can't afford to think of it or write it. I'll have to disregard my personal opinion of his show and write a hard-boiled, tongue-in-cheek piece. I can't afford to let Long John down, so I'll describe the gangling, twangy-voiced gent who was characterized in Argosy in 1951, when Long John Nebel was just a salesman and not on the radio, as the man who can sell anything, and I'll add a phrase, but buys almost nothing. John, having sold such diverse products as firecrackers, mind readings, and orange squeezies, is not a man who is easily convinced by a slick-tongued tale. His favorite expression, both on the radio and off, is "I won't buy that," and yet, by a seeming paradox, he has built a phenomenally successful show on what most people would term tall tales, or just tall tales. All right. Now, let me go over here real quick. I want to see if anyone's watching me on Rumble or Odyssey. So I'll basically reload these pages to make sure. We have one watching. Not too bad. Okay, let me go over here. It's still loading, so I'll just go back over here. Let's continue with the article. Flying saucers are a media sensation. Long John Nebel always kept his fingers on the pulse of the American people and knew that almost everyone was wondering about those enigmatic flying saucers. Most of the callers to his Party Line program insisted that the United States government was ignoring or suppressing information about aerial phenomena witnessed by thousands of people since the dawn of the age of the flying saucers, with the sighting of 9 disc-shaped objects flying information over Mount Rainier in Washington state by the civilian pilot Kenneth Arnold back on 24th June 1947. These same callers firmly believed that people from other planets were visiting the Earth in these flying saucers, and Long John had to admit that perhaps they had a genuine point, since the American and Soviet governments were then soberly announcing plans to begin massive programs for the exploration of the moon and eventually the neighboring planets of Venus and Mars. Somehow the idea expressed on the Party Line in 1958 did not seem as crackpot as they did before October 1957 in the pre-Sputnik era. I guess they wouldn't. And because when Sputnik happened, folks, when people had to worry about the Soviets having their own spy satellite flying over our heads, people certainly did start believing that we were going to colonize space, and that if we didn't, the Russians would. And that would be a very, very horrible thing indeed. So what do you make of that, folks? Very terrifying. Let me go back over here and let's see. We have one currently watching. We have one watching here. Let me go back over here. We have a few people watching over there. Not too bad. Let's continue. Either way, let's get to this part of the article. Close encounters. Sometimes one flying saucer encounter will stand out above the rest, and therefore deserves a show all of its own. One such case involved an Illinois state police officer, Lieutenant John Henry from the city of Champion, Illinois, who confirmed reports from the two highway patrolmen of an encounter with a low-hovering flying saucer that caused their car's radio to go dead. Besides this reported electromagnetic effect, the report itself was corroborated by scores of Illinois residents who also witnessed the same object at the same object at the same time, albeit from a more distant perspective. I imagine they would want to basically be a more distant perspective, since you're seeing a bunch of alien things or possible alien flying saucers over your head. If you'd seen any 50s sci-fi movies, then you probably were thinking that these guys were probably going to start shooting laser guns at you and basically trying to take over the planet. So yeah, being at a fair distance probably would be better for anyone to be watching these things, wouldn't it? So, but when it came to shows about flying saucers on the party line, not only did Long John invite people who had witnessed these mysterious objects, but also those who claimed to have experienced contact with the occupants of these strange craft. These were known as the contactees, and there were some that even went so far as to assert that they had taken short jaunts to the moon, Venus, and Mars. These were not claiming to have been abducted as many in the contemporary time, but say they took these special trips at the friendly invitation of our brothers and sisters from other planets. On the party line, the contactees would go into great detail in describing their experiences with the space people. Unlike George Norrie of today on his Coast to Coast AM radio show, Long John Nebel proved to be a tough interrogator of the contactees, and he wasn't alone. Other specialists from many fields would also take turns on the air as members of a panel and asking hard questions to all of Long John's guests. I imagine that's a good idea, honestly. Yeah, that is a very good idea. Let me go back over here. Wow, we have 2 watching. Not too bad, not too bad. 1 watching, 3 watching. Not too bad, not too bad. Hit that like button, folks, if you have not, and it really helps me. Yeah. Editor's note: keep checking the website for part 2 in the series, where Cosmic Ray looks at some of the special topics discussed on the party line in addition to the program's unique format. In fact, I waited until they updated this article, folks, and brought out chapter 2. It's down here, folks. So we'll be looking at chapter 2 or part 2 of this article. So it's just down here, folks. So let me go down here. It's right over here. Long John Nebel and his Party Line Program, Part 2. Long John Nebel and his Party Line Program, Part 2. By Raymond A. Keller, Ph.D., a.k.a. Cosmic Ray, the author of the international award-winning Venus Rising series. Published by Headline Books and available on Amazon.com. Available on Amazon.com while supplies last. Give you a little shout out there, man. Here's Long John Nebel, a photo of him, folks. Can I blow it up? It got smaller. Never mind, but this is Long John Nebel basically doing his job. He's looking at a record right there. But either way, let's continue and see exactly who Long John interviewed and how his show was basically being held. That's what this part of the article is supposed to be about. Hypnosis was just one of the many esoteric subjects discussed by Long John Nebel on New York City radio station's Wars Party Line program. Photo source Argosy magazine, New York City, April 1958. Esoteric subjects abound. He didn't just look at UFOs, folks. He also did other things. He talked about the paranormal, and that was Long John Nebel's. Well, that was what he did. He looked at everything that was weird out there. He looked at high strangeness before it became real. Before that term was even basically, made. Either way, Long John Nebel's Partyline radio program brought its listeners numerous experts in many fields who in turn delivered to them substantial knowledge on a wide variety of esoteric and certainly controversial subjects. Hypnosis Explained. Two such experts were frequently brought to the party line were the world-famous Hungarian hypnotist Dr. Franz Julius Polgar, a practicing psychologist in New York City who obtained his PhD in psychology at the University of Hungary in Budapest. Okay. All right, that's interesting. Yeah, this guy's like that. And Joseph Elderman, the president of the National Federation of Hypnotists, who gained a significant degree of fame in the boroughs of New York City after he successfully used hypnosis to rid Brooklyn Dodgers pitcher John Newcombs of his flying phobia. In 1957, just 1 year before he and his team moved out to Los Angeles, California. Okay, I heard about this guy. Yeah, this guy actually hypnotized this ball player who was afraid of flying and basically got rid of his fear of it. Is it a true story? I guess it's a true story. A little out there and a little scary because hypnosis like that's like mind control, and I really hate the idea of any kind of mind control. But hey, at least he helped that guy, I suppose. And this ball player could now fly anywhere in the world. Interesting. Oh, we have 5 watching. That is just great. Hit that like button, folks. Hit it. So we have 6 people watching, 7 people watching. That is just perfect. Let's go back over here and continue with this article. All right. Now we just came to basically talk about these 2 hypnotists who were on Long John Nebel's program. One of them was the guy who basically hypnotized a ball player and basically cured him of his phobia of flying. And the other one was another hypnotist. The Sunday program, yeah, but the hypnotist who basically cured that ball player was something else, isn't he? Either way, let's continue. The Sunday programs on hypnosis proved quite informative to Long John's radio audience, for they learned what hypnotism was, as well as some of the secrets of the great hypnotists. Most of the listeners knew about the use of hypnosis in stage shows, but thanks to Long John's program, they began to appreciate the therapeutic use of hypnosis in the laboratory or doctor's office by degree and accredited psychologists. In years to come, hypnosis would also become an important tool for trained psychologists in investigating and evaluating the claims of the alleged victims of alien abductions. Extrasensory perception, ESP. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about this. As I said, folks, this part of the article, part 2 of Long John Nebel's of these various articles on him, talks about the various subjects he covered. Here we're going to him talking about extrasensory perception. Long John Nebel also had the foremost authority in the world on extrasensory perception, ESP, on his program, Dr. Joseph B. Rhine, the head of the Department of Parapsychology at the Duke University Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina. Many Party Line listeners called in to explain occasions where they experienced hunches or premonitions that came true. Dr. Rhine took the time to explain to both Long John Nebel and his audience just how far science had come in studying these types of phenomena, just how far science still had to go in that investigation of these still largely unexplained qualities inherent in the human mind. Interestingly, Long John noted that these contactees with a background in theosophy like George Amsky or Dorothy Martin, aka Sister Thedera, also pointed out that one of the reasons for the extraterrestrial presence on Earth was to work behind the scenes to help select individuals develop some of the psychic powers that were latent within them, so that they in turn could use these newfound psychic powers to help elevate the levels of consciousness of the whole human race, of the whole human species. All right, interesting. All right, what do you make of it, folks? As we've talked about before, folks, do you think that these aliens are here and they are interested in basically elevating all of us to a higher consciousness, that we become more kind and more noble then? Is that why they're really here, folks? Certainly, people do talk about it. We'd rather talk about that and hope for it rather than basically think we're being invaded. But these aliens haven't invaded us yet. I must stress that point in in almost all my streams. I stress this point, folks. I do not trust the aliens all that much. I need to know more about them, but they have not yet attacked us. There are people who claim that we've been abducted, but those abductions, those abduction stories, they could all be forgeries done by the government. As I said, folks, the government could very well try to use aliens as a political tool and by painting them as evil to basically get their way. But as yet, folks, these aliens have not attacked us. But it doesn't mean I trust them either, folks. I must stress that point as well. I do not trust them because I need to learn more about it. And just because they say they're here to elevate our species to a higher level does not mean it's true. But they still get the benefit of the doubt from me. All right, now we come to controversies, I guess. All right, what do you make of this, folks? Let's get into it and hear exactly what John Nebel covered. On an occasional but extremely charged controversial topic was not out of bounds for Long John Nebel and War's Party Line program, one program that generated a great deal of heat, so to speak, dealing with the subject of euthanasia, commonly called mercy killing, when another human being is suffering horribly from pain from which there is no medical relief, and they specifically ask for help in terminating their life. Is it morally permissible for one to help such a friend pass over onto the other side of the veil, as it were? And back in the second half of the 1950s, many people unfamiliar with the concept of reincarnation were introduced to it by sundry guests on Long John Nebel's Party Line. Yet another controversial subject tackled on the program that of the fluoridation of your drinking water. Yeah, I am really fluoridation. I don't think is actually all that good, no matter how many experts say it is, folks. Many at the time and even today wonder if the alleged benefits outweigh the costs and risks of fluoridating our water supplies. And let us not forget the performance of unnecessary surgery. Even today, this is still a critical issue that requires more discussion by all involved in the healthcare process, both informed patients and medical personnel. Yes, nobody else on the air was talking about these subjects on radio or television, so we see how Long John Nebel was at filling a vital societal role. All right, not bad. Let me go over here before we continue. 5 watching, 6 watching, 7 watching. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's continue, folks, with this article. Now we come to format. When Long John Nebel was first given the late night time slot, War management did not think the show would last because radio surveys showed that not enough people were awake during these hours to make it profitable for advertisers. That's a freaking lie. Long John Nebel became world famous because of his show, and people did listen to it. However, at that time, the all-night music format of most stations was putting their listeners to sleep, but the lively panel discussions and engaging topics of the Party Line were consistently drawing in new listeners and expanding the audience, both based substantially. Apart from the insomniacs, very few marketers realized just how many people worked at night, i.e., actors, artists, cabbies, doctors, milkmen, nurses, truck drivers, writers, etc., and that all these people kept their radios on in the background, closely paying attention to the Party Line to find out what Long John Nebel and the experts had to say on almost any uncanny subject, like the value of taking vitamins, or even the Venusians who clandestinely live among us and walk our streets. Okay. Do you think there are Venusians out there, folks? Some of these contactors say that some of these alien beings they've contacted, these humanoid aliens, are from Venus as well as Mars. Do you think they are? Maybe. All right. And yeah. What do you make of it, folks? Very, very fun article we're reading tonight, folks. What do you make about Long John Nebel and his program? Certainly, I'll probably basically try to find a few of his programs on YouTube after the show is done. I've listened to at least a few minutes of his show before, and maybe a few more. Listen to some Art Bell as well tonight. Either way, let's have some fun and talk about him a bit more now. Oh, we come to the end of this part of the article. Editor's note: keep checking the website for part 3 in this series, where Cosmic Ray looks at the backgrounds of some of the most unusual panelists and guests on the party line, in addition to the unique background of Long John Nebel that prepared him for his job as America's most influential radio broadcast personality. Don't worry, folks. When I decided to do my program on him tonight because part 3 was already out. So let's take a look at it. It's down here. Let's see. Long John Nebel and his Party Line program, part 3. All right, we already did Raymond A. Keller, the writer of this article, in about his, Venus Rising series that's available on Amazon.com while supplies last. So we'll just move on. Midnight Madness at War. Long John Nebel's right, his patient center, and guest left. Yeah, Long John Nebel right, and his at his panelist center, and his guest left debate the nature and possible origin of the sundry paranormal phenomena. Radio source Argosy Magazine, New York City, April 1958. Okay, here's Long John Nebel. He doesn't have his glasses on, so he looks different. Here's the guy in the middle is his panelist, and the guy on the left over there is his interviewee. All right, interesting. Left. Okay, so let's get into this part of the article. Unique panelists. Panelists on Long John Nebel's Party Line were just as unique as the program's guests. All of the regular panelists on the show were living in New York City metropolitan area, and among these were Bill Preston, artist and comedian. Bill Preston, an artist and comedian, first came to the attention of Long John Nebel when he read a newspaper account of Preston's visit to Mexico in order to paint the bullfights, but ended up fighting the bull himself. Okay. William Neff, magician, I guess. William Neff was one of the foremost illusionist magicians in the United States, and in 1957, he was so recognized as being the greatest in that category through his selection as the winner of the Bernadette Orson Welles Award. Joseph Markoff, retired Army major. Long John Nebel relied heavily on Joseph Markoff for obtaining background information on both the guests and the subjects featured in the Party Line program. Nebel described Markoff as a walking encyclopedia who knows something about everything. A retired military officer, Markoff had traveled extensively through many countries on duty assignments, picking up much concerning the cultures and languages he encountered along the way. Okay, so these are some of the panelists, the people who helped him to basically interview these contactees and witnessers of their on his various programs, and basically try to evaluate if these people were telling the truth or not. Not a bad idea. Very smart. Mel Scaloni, Semiticist, Mel Ciccone. Mel Ciccone could always be counted on by Long John to ask the most probing and challenging questions. Interestingly, Scaloni considered himself an expert on author Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books. Tex Dermont, science writer and Ghostbuster, okay? Tex Dermont was a pseudonym to protect this popular science writer's real identity. Long John considered Dermont his primary authority on extrasensory perception, ESP, and poltergeists, i.e., these annoying ghosts who toss plates around and generally create havoc among the human beings so unfortunate enough to run into them. Naturally, back in the late 1950s, if the editors of the newspapers and science journals who published Dermont's articles knew that he was investigating ESP, ghosts, and other psychic phenomena, he would most certainly receive a pink slip and find himself in the unemployment line. Yeah, sadly. Let me go back over here real quick. We have 5 watching, 6 watching. Okay. 7 watching. Okay. Just to take another look to see who's watching my show tonight, folks. We're doing pretty good. There's 7 people watching right now, and we're having some fun. Now we come to the next panelist, or the next guy who basically was on Long John Nebel's show. Yeah, one of his panelists. Roy Benson, a comedian. Roy Benson was a popular nightclub comic on the New York City scene. David Bell, psychologist. I guess you wanted to have a comedian with you sometimes. They can basically as I said, folks, uh, back in medieval times, the one person a king wouldn't execute was his comic, was the jester. And they basically, and this comes up here, folks, because a jester, a comedian, can often basically while he's making jokes, will also make his jokes poignant questions, basically tearing into the witness. Well, not so much tearing into him, making light of the situation isn't that bad, but also basically trying to get down to the real truth of it as well, maybe trying to air out the uncomfortable facts. So certainly having a comedian on board at times on your panelist show, trying to evaluate if someone's telling the truth or not, or trying to basically find the best way to entertain people is certainly a good idea, I'd say. Either way, at least the audience was probably entertained. Didn't know if they ever found any truth to any of these things. Honestly, you needed proof to actually prove aliens exist, or if any of this actually happens. But now we come to the next panelist, Roy Benson. David Bell, psychologist. Besides being an accredited psychologist, David Bell was also considered to be a scholar in all areas related to the higher functions of the human mind. Charles Ledham, investigative journalist. Charles Ledham, an investigative journalist, always approached the subjects discussed in the party line in a skeptical view. Morris Powley, police sergeant. Morris Powley was a police sergeant in the Perth-Amboy, New Jersey Police Department when guests or topics dealt with possible infringements of the law. The presence of Sergeant Parley on the panel proved most effective in getting to the truth of the situation. Not bad. Occasional panelists. Okay. While all of the above regular panelists lived in the greater New York City area, the following panelists lived further afield, would occasionally visit Long John Nebel in the Woe studio when they happened to be visiting the metropolis, or especially called in for Long John to tap their expertise. Richard Humber, band leader. Ivan T. Sanderson, animal trapper and cryptozoologist. Will Osler, religion and inspirational writer. And Jules B. St. Germain, attorney. Some remarkable guests. One who lived back in the day when Long John Nebel ruled the radio airwaves might rightly acknowledge that every guest on the party line had something remarkably offbeat to say about a subject that would never be discussed on any other radio stations at the time, being then considered as taboo by most American and Canadian listeners. A few of the more popular guests included Harriet M. Shelton, medium. Harriet reportedly spoke with Abraham Lincoln on a daily basis. Sometimes when she was on the party line, she would even channel Lincoln's comments on some of the more dire contemporary issues. She even wrote a book containing a collection of the messages she channeled from the late Civil War president. Abraham Lincoln returned New York City Evans Publishing Company, 1957. When Long John asked her what Lincoln thought about paranormal phenomena, she noted that she had channeled this message from him in 1955. To believe in what you can see and touch is no belief at all, but to believe in the unseen is a triumph and a blessing. Not bad. Do you believe this woman, folks? She says she's a medium. She might be, she might not be. Dr. Frederick Wolfham, psychiatrist. This doctor devoted his life to crusading against the alleged corrupting influence that comic books exercised. Oh God, this guy. Jeez. They exercised over the minds of children everywhere. This is the guy who gave us the Comics Code Authority. The comics, that thing that basically meant that your books would you couldn't basically have more adult subjects in comic books in America. This is the guy, I think. Yeah, this is psychologist. Great. Well, either way, let's continue. Dr. Witham explained why he thought comic books were so pernicious. They gave children motivation and exact details for accomplishing murder, rape, and other forms of antisocial behavior. You can do the same things by reading a book. Jeez. When Long John asked him to provide some examples, the psychiatrist denoted 4 DC Comics characters: Superman, Batman, Robin, and Wonder Woman. Apparently, Superman is representative of a master racist. Okay. Inspiring fascist and racist tendencies. Of course it does, you little... Was this guy a communist by any chance? Causing... of course, Superman is the fascist here. How annoying. Superman, a fascist. Either way, this was basically described Superman a la fascist... inspiring fascist and racist tendencies a la Friedrich Nietzsche. Batman and Robin are leading children into the consideration of homosexual lifestyle. Well, they've been arguing that the people have been joking about Batman and Robin living together like that for decades, folks. Too bad. It seems to basically be coming true now with the people who basically follow the Communist Manifesto, basically trying to basically alter our heroes into things they shouldn't be. If you know anything about it, folks, you know that one of the Robins is now uh, apparently gay when he hasn't been gay when he was first portrayed for decades as being a heterosexual relationship with his girlfriend. And Batman now trying to basically destroy him as well. Sadly, either way, I think this guy pretty much started it. And even worse, pedophilia. Yeah, I've heard that before as well. And as for Wonder Woman, always being tied up by a villain, she was apparently being set up for a rape or acts of sexual deviance carried out against her will. Not really, folks. One of the original ways Wonder Woman was beat up by her villains was because her weakness back then was that if she was restrained in any way, she lost her powers. That means if you were able to get a rope around her, she couldn't basically fight back. They changed that weakness later on and stuff like that, and now she can just kick ass no matter what. Usually, the only one who can beat her is stronger opponents, and there are few stronger opponents than Wonder Woman, but it still happens where she can get beat up by a villain, and that includes female villains as well. Either way, let's continue. The Doctor's frequent castigations of the comic book industry were in large part responsible for the adoption of the self-regulation of the sundry comic book publishers in the Comics Code Authority, CCA. Yeah, that thing. Rules and placement of the CCA stamp on the cover of many comic books. This was a preemptive move by the CCA made in 1954 and expanding thereafter to more and more comic book titles as Congress was getting ready to enact laws and impose legislation if the industry failed to clean itself up. Of course they would do that because the government has a right to basically take away our free speech. No, they do not, folks. Long John Nebel's background. Long John Nebel first came to the attention of War Radio Management back in 1951, when its vice president, Rob Letter, read an article about him and his powers as a highly effective salesman in an issue of Agassi magazine, written by that magazine's correspondent, Pierce Fredericks. It inspired Leader to drive out to Nebel's auction barn in Paris-Funny, New Jersey, and interview with the suave, Chicago-born gentleman. Later was looking over new blood in the then flagging commercial radio industry. Somebody that Long John Nebel's background. Yeah, that's exactly, folks. This is how Long John Nebel got into radio and made his party line program. Either way, the then flagging commercial radio industry, somebody that management could count on to peddle sundry wares via the airwaves, generating advertisement revenue for the station. Nebel acquired the nickname Long John back in his elementary school days, as he was the tallest and thinnest among his classmates. After completing the 8th grade, at the age of 11, he quit school to illegally sell fireworks. When his father, a medical doctor, discovered what his son was up to, he forced him to find other employment. Long John then decided to leave home and join the circus, signing on as a clown. From his circus experience, he went on to manage Siamese twins in a freak show and then took a turn as a magician. After the circus arrived in New York City, Long John stayed on, whence he became a self-made expert in telepathic communication and fortune telling. Tired of living on the edge all the time, but realizing that he could sell almost anything, he put his savings to work on purchasing a general store in Paris-Funny, New Jersey, where he converted it into an auction house. From then on, Long John began his illustrious career of buying, trading, and selling everything under the sun, and in the process amassing a small fortune for himself. His fascination with the occult rose from his work as a magician, fortune teller, and mind reader. When Letter offered him the job of conducting his program at War, pending the approval of the station's board of directors, it came as no surprise that the focus was going to be on all aspects of the supernatural. Yeah. Okay, there's a part 4 coming, folks, but that wasn't out. Mainly because we're already almost an hour into this live stream, and we've come to the end of this article, but we can talk about Long John for a few minutes. What do you think about Long John Nebel? Do you believe any of his guests were telling the truth? Do you think Long John believed in the supernatural? Certainly, he was a magician and and somewhat of a shyster and almost comes off as a con man. But I could believe that he does believe in this subject as well. But certainly it is, even if he didn't believe in it, folks, the subjects he talked about were certainly interesting. And he was the first of his kind. His party line, and I gotta love the name for his program, for folks, the party line, where he talked about supernatural phenomena and basically had some fun. Certainly, that was Long John Nebel is a legend. Basically, he's only in the shadow of Art Bell, I'd say, who basically became even more famous than him and more of a radio personality, at least on the subject of the paranormal. And certainly, Long John Nebel is better than George Snorri. All right, I think I've heard a few of Art Bell's shows, and I've certainly heard of them on YouTube and stuff like that. Certainly great. Long John Nebel, I think I listened to one of his shows on YouTube. Certainly, his show was fun. In fact, do you think he was inspired? Were you inspired Long John to come up with this idea, basically bring it to a radio station and basically do his paranormal show? Do you think someone visited him? Do you think what inspired him to basically think of this idea? Certainly, back in the 50s, this was a time where I didn't think anyone was going to be interested in basically talking about the paranormal. Certainly, most people in America would consider people who talked about this stuff freaks and weirdos. Certainly, I didn't think these kind of shows became popular, at least until somewhat time in the 70s and 80s. But here we have Long John Nebel starting a show back in 1954 during the flying saucer debacle that was going over they had been basically all over America since 1947. Certainly, I can see people seeing flying saucers inspired Long John Nebel to basically go to this radio station with his idea of starting a radio show, a talk show talking about the paranormal, not just aliens, but all the weird things that go on in the world. Yeah, I can see that would basically inspire him. Yeah, let me go over here real quick. We have 4 watching, not too bad. 5 watching, all right. 6 watching. Okay, not too bad, not too bad. But what do you make of it, folks? I keep saying that. I'm trying to give an idea here. I'm trying to think of an idea to continue. Long John Nebel's guests were certainly out there. Then we also have that psychologist who basically destroyed American comics. Comics only really continued. I mean, we had Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and the X-Men who basically brought back comics back in the Silver Age of comics. This guy pretty much ended the Golden Age. Either way, certainly comics continued in America, but it was only in Japan with manga, as well as in Europe, that comics really went into their own. That adult comics were made, and I don't mean porn. I mean comics with adult subjects, with heroes fighting villains in ways that you can just imagine, as well as other comics with maybe not so much that there's a hero or a villain in them, but certainly science fiction or fantasy stories where they're fighting, where things are going on, where people are trying to live their lives, and these stories these stories are certainly legendary. I can name a few artists who basically worked all over the planet, who are basically world famous now. We have Kira Toriyama in Japan. We have the guy who basically created Lorelei and Valerian and Lorelei, those 2 guys. We also have another few artists and stuff like that over in Europe. I'm trying to think here. Certainly some other guys. I can't think of his name. He's a real known artist who basically who's legendary. He worked with the guy who basically wanted to do the Dune movie, the Jodesky guy. And there's also Jodesky himself, who basically became a comic book writer over in Europe, and his books are widely recognized as some of the best science fiction over there. Either way, all of this is highly great. But you can thank this psychiatrist for destroying American comics. We could have better comics. We could have had better comics for decades. And thanks to him, we had to basically live with the Comics Code Authority. But either way, Long John Nebel certainly basically helped change America. He brought these esoteric and paranormal subjects out to the common man, and from there we can see how it's changed the world. Certainly, for decades, people have basically thought people who believed in this stuff were idiots or weirdos. But certainly, they can't. Most of these experts, no matter how many times they said it was swamp gas or an air balloon, can't basically explain away all of these different subjects. Can't find a rational explanation to it because there is none. Certainly, that is true. We can thank Long John Nebel for doing that. And from him, he probably inspired Art Bell, who went on to inspire others, who could basically, as well as basically helping, and these men basically helped the paranormal movement, UFO investigators basically keep moving forward and trying to find the answers that would basically explain these different subjects, from parapsychology to ghost monsters to the UFO question. What is actually happening around us? What is happening in the skies? What happens when people see something they can't explain, like a ghost? What if where they see cryptids and stuff like that? Certainly cryptozoology itself is another interesting subject, because certainly cryptozoologists don't have to explain every monster they find or every animal they try to investigate as something supernatural. Certainly, the skeptics and the so-called experts don't believe even most cryptozoologists, because even if the cryptozoologists say it's just an animal, you have to actually bring this animal to certain individuals who are experts, or to the authorities, so that they believe them. You have to have physical evidence. Certainly, that's a thing that cryptozoologists have done. Well, and every time that has happened where a cryptozoologist has proved an animal exists, well, later on, the experts say, okay, yeah, that animal exists. It's a real animal, but it's not supernatural. Basically, still dump on cryptozoologists and stuff like that. Certainly, thanks to Long John Nebel, who basically had a cryptozoologist on his show, certainly basically brought that into the limelight as well, showing, basically taking away the shadows and basically showing that these people aren't lunatics who investigate this stuff. Certainly, with cryptozoologists, there are as many real animals they've discovered, or rather basically trying to prove these animals and plants exist, while other experts will say no matter what, they don't exist. Remember, folks, they say the same thing about the guy who discovered that a few lost cities, particularly the city of Troy. So people who basically investigate this stuff, people who investigate this stuff are certainly in the right, no matter how much criticism they get. But that's for all of you to decide if these people are good or not. I certainly think that people who do investigate this stuff are good, and we can thank Long John Nebel to basically bringing more of this stuff out into the open, so more people can understand what exactly is going on in the world. But we're at the end of this video, folks, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. We have 6 people watching. That's good. 7 people watching. 8 people watching. That's good. That's perfect. Either way, folks, hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Let's see. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Make sure to hit the part of the bell that will give you all future notifications. Share this video out. Yeah. And one more time, folks, leave some comments down below. If you want to see the stream again, use the link on the pinned tweet on my Twitter page at 777megachris1. Let's see. Please go over and subscribe to Creepy Little Book on YouTube and on BitChute. Creepy Little Book is like the Art Bell radio show. He does, well, if you like my show or Long John Nebel's show, then you're going to love Creepy Little Book. Yeah, if you like my show, you're going to love Creepy Little Book. His show is great. He talks about ghost monsters. He does short videos on the paranormal, but his live streams are just great. So go and subscribe to Creepy Little Book on YouTube and on BitChute. Then go and subscribe to Robot Co-op. Now, Robot Co-op is a live streaming gaming channel, but they're like Mystery Science Theater 3000. You know that old show that roasts bad movies? Mystery Science Theater 3000. If you like that show, then you're going to love watching these guys play. Then you're going to love watching these guys play video games and roast the video games they're playing. They use these puppets in their show that make it even better. They like Mystery Science Theater 3000. They use robot puppets, and you're going to love their horror game live streams on Sunday on Twitch because they're just fun as hell. So go and subscribe to Robot Co-op and watch their live streams on YouTube. They're just fun to watch. And one more time, folks, go and subscribe to Robot Co-op on YouTube and on Twitch. I also want you to go over and subscribe to Stitched Together Picks on YouTube. Stitched Together Picks is a horror movie review channel hosted by the maniacal cinephile who has multiple personalities. You're getting more than one character, folks. You're getting a whole lot of them. All of them are fun. So go and subscribe to Stitched Together Picks on YouTube, okay? Remember, folks, down in the descriptions, I left links to Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, and BitChute. Okay? Yeah, Rumble, Twitter, Odyssey. Yeah, let me try that again, folks. YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, and BitChute. I also left links in the chat as well to go subscribe to me, so please do so. And remember, folks, I upload exclusive videos to Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, and BitChute that I do not upload to YouTube. If you want them, please go subscribe to me, okay? Till next time, I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs channel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great live stream, so be sure to come back again then. Till next time, folks, I will see you all again soon. I'll have an even better show tomorrow. So see you guys.